Welcome to another episode of Sideline Sister. It's, as usual, very great to have you here. In carrying on what I have been speaking about, I am very honoured to have Mr. Peter Woods chatting with me today regarding gender-based violence. Why do we think it's happening? Where do we go to from here? Is this something that we can solve? And the reason I trust Peter with this conversation is because astrologically Peter has a Sagittarius North Node, so in this lifetime really knowledge is key for Peter, and I know that you are very knowledgeable about many things, so thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Nadine. It's great to be here and to be part of your channel. I love the introduction that speaks about me being knowledgeable, and I really have enjoyed in my years talking and reflecting with people the idea that we're all just beggars telling the other beggars where we found some bread.
Right.
So I really don't think that I'm the right person to be talking about gender-based violence, because I'm in this body, so white South African male.
Right.
Is probably not the right incarnation to actually be speaking at all. So thank you for trusting me with it.
I do, because I like the fact that you're a man. I've been speaking to women about this, and we of course come from that area. I mean, in my 41 years living in South Africa, I never walk anywhere without looking over my shoulder. I never get into a car and don't lock it immediately. So that is such a part of my frame of reference, where for you it would be less of that. You would be able to go places much easier. So I think you've also observed enough people over the years, maybe just to have a little bit of an insight into maybe what are happening in people's homes. You know, are children left to their own devices as youngsters? Is this maybe why? Is there a lack of respect being taught? You know, at what point, maybe even through history, at what point was it decided that, you know, these precious, beautiful beings who bring men into this world are not treated as precious beings?
Yeah, I think just a little bit of background about myself. So I'm informed very much, not so much by astrology, although I have respected your readings and things that you've done for me, and they've been very accurate. But my work as a counsellor and as a therapist and a communicator is really informed by the works of Carl Jung, who
Right.
Started his work with Freud, then broke with Freud in a very traumatic moment for himself. And so Jung works a lot with the unconscious. And for me,
Right.
whenever we're going to have these kind of discussions about these terrible things that are happening in the world, I think part of the clue gets found, or the clues get found in the unconscious. And so Jung has this saying where he says that if there are things in the unconscious that are not being worked on or integrated, those things will show up in real life as fate, and then we'll have to deal with it.
Right.
And so for me, whether it's gender-based violence, whether it's xenophobia that we're experiencing a lot of in South Africa right now, whether it's the scapegoating of people who aren't stereotypically binary sexually.
Right.
In all of those areas,
Right.
I think what we're seeing, and I can unpack it a little bit later, but what we're seeing are these undigested shadow parts of our consciousness that are not being dealt with, being avoided.
Right.
For whatever reason, denial, projection,
Right.
whatever, and it's manifesting in these terrible things that we see.
Because those things are actually still important. I mean, a good amount of stress is important in our life. Having a bit of anger at the right time is a very important thing. We're never going to eradicate that. It's very true what you're saying, though. It's where we're channeling that into, and what we're allowing. And it's actually, obviously, we are creating this and perpetuating this. So for us to expect it to change, we really all have to put that certain work in.
Well, you see, I'm not sure that one can actually work at this thing,
Yeah.
because that's part of the problem.
Well, exactly.
That's a very male
yes
orientation.
very hard. Yes.
Yeah, so I go looking for part of the answers as to why this much undigested shadow. And I go way back, because my field is religion, and I've spent a lot of time studying religions, including my own as a Christ follower. I notice that there's been this shift away from matriarchal religion.
Right.
The earth.
Very long ago.
Yeah, very long ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's some scary statistics that more women were burned and killed than people who died in the Holocaust. Now, both of those are shocking events.
Absolutely.
And one should be comparing. But that's what happens. So you have this, the earliest religious symbol that's been found, the artifact that's been dug out, is of a pregnant woman. It's a fertility symbol.
The fertility, right.
So we have this matriarchal, maternal, the goddess of the earth, Gaia, who lives in the earth.
The nourisher, yeah.
And then at some point you have sort of around the axial age, sort of 500 BCE, you have this arrival of the sun god.
Right.
And so from being earth-based and earth-bound and caring for the earth and nurturing, and God is in the earth, God suddenly goes up and lives in the sky.
Becomes a separate thing.
And becomes very male.
Right.
So it's no longer the feminine, it's no longer the womb and the nurturing and the birth.
And the balance between the male and the female.
Exactly. And now it becomes this very patriarchal God who sits up there and demands and is very hard on a woman. So I think if you start putting that into the mix, you have the splitting off then of the feminine.
Well, that's very important for me in this mix, because I'm quite concerned that with the amount of anger and aggression, there's definitely a place for that, but now we're having these woman uprising things and these Facebook pages, and I'm just concerned that we swing and become that male energy as well in our femininity, where it becomes that we almost start looking down on men instead of trying to just balance that again.
Well, you see, I'm interested in the name of your channel as Sideline Sister, so that already says to me there's a perception that you are on the sidelines,
Well,
that you've been pushed up.
No, I'm a supportive, that is a role I play, so that is why I chose that. So I'm sort of like I would be your support, as an astrologer.
Right.
But yes, certainly it isn't, if you put it that way, for sure.
So all in so in the patriarchy of business, in the patriarchy of economics, in the patriarchy of education, you keep going. I mean, there are just these male-dominated systems,
right?
And they are what is destroying everything. So Jung has this saying where he says, the more glittering the image, the darker the shadow it hides. And if you look around us at our consumer society, it's all about glitz and glamour and consuming and
me. It's
exactly.
no longer even about us and how do we, if it's me.
And so that in itself is this glittering image, and so the more glittering the image becomes, the deeper the shadow.
Right.
And there's the split. So in terms of my own processing, when we don't integrate the shadow, if we don't grapple with our own darkness, the place where I have to say to myself, I am capable of all the violence that I see in the world.
Absolutely. Which is a frightening thought.
I have a shadow. I have the potential to be a rapist. I have the potential to be a misogynist. I have the potential to be all of these things: rapist, racist, murderer. All that. When I can face that and acknowledge it in myself, suddenly I begin to get some kind of integration. Right. But when one refuses to deal with the shadow, as our culture does, where cowboys aren't allowed to cry, at least not in front of their horses, and males are taught to be tough and hard, and
you keep that stuff inside.
Exactly, and billiard balls, that everything just bounces off them.
Right.
The shadow's got nowhere to go, and so if you don't integrate your own shadow, then you're going to project it. And I don't know if you've noticed that the people who most irritate you are the people who are just like you.
Exactly.
They are so freaking irritating.
Right.
But that's because I see myself in them. But you see, so when you project and then you go for the next move, which is scapegoating,
Right.
you've got a recipe for disaster. So now it becomes, I was reading an article recently about why does it say women who were raped? Why doesn't it say men who raped women?
Exactly.
So
Yes,
immediately it's the woman.
to put it onto the woman
And,
again.
and so there's this whole story about the
Like
double
victim
rape.
blaming.
Yeah, the victim blaming, the double rape of...
Oh, what
not-
was she wearing?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's that nonsense. And then going through the process, the whole DNA process of the rape kit, I mean, that in itself is virtually a second rape. You know?
Absolutely.
So all of these things, I think, are the effects of us trying to create this glitzy world where we don't want to deal with shadow and darkness. And I think, I don't know much about astrology, but I think astrology tries to hold these energies in a creative tension. You know, not every reading is going to tell you that you're going to meet a tall, dark stranger who's going to sweep you away.
Well, it shouldn't.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's possibilities. Same as when I write about, like, Saturn has just gone direct. It's not going to be the same for you as me, but that channel is there. You know, it's always a good idea to do some self-work and to improve, but sometimes our own personal channels are more open. That's what astrology, there's never an absolute, which I love about it.
So one of the things that I use a lot in my work, and I don't know what astrology would say about that, is that at a moment like this, when there's so much activism, and you pointed to the fact that, you know, the activists could in fact become the terrorists of tomorrow. Right. There's always that danger of being so disempowered.
Yes.
Like the African National Congress and Nelson Mandela in South Africa got to a point where peaceful resistance was just not working, and so they went for violence.
Right.
Because it was just, they were so thwarted.
Right.
So you've pointed to that danger and that tension. So the question now becomes, how do I engage this thing? And immediately I'd like to have 3 points and a strategy, and so I can just tick the boxes and get it done. But it's not that simple. So one of the phrases that I get from one of my teachers, a guy called Robert Johnson, he's got a phrase which says, don't just do something, stand there. Which is the flip on what we normally hear. It's like, don't just stand there, do something.
Right.
But there's something very profound in not jumping in.
Right.
And just waiting and observing and doing your inner work.
Becoming self-aware. Right.
So where does consciousness shift? It shifts when I am prepared to shift my own consciousness.
Can that happen on this plane? Can we get to that point where it's not just, okay, I'm doing this, I'm self-aware, I've got to keep myself in check. Where as a rule, for example, we are able to, at what point can we be teaching our kids this, you know? I know they say don't teach your children to meditate before the age of 8 because they're just too fidgety and you'll actually potentially put them off it. But there must be that moment where they're ripe for it, you know, all those good things, respect, self-respect, not even just respect for others, because of course we know if we can't do it to ourselves, then we can't do it to others. And I think there's that kind of education which becomes much more feminine now, which is needed, and that's why I'm really concerned, or really trying to keep that feminine energy feminine, because the feminine energy is the one that don't just do something, stand there. It flows like that. It's not that action, Mars, fire. You know, in one of my talks I was saying that if we look at, if I take your astrology chart and mine, we cannot pinpoint who's the male and who's the female. In fact, I might have more prominent male energy. So therefore that whole gender thing definitely doesn't become null and void. I understand we have different hormones within these bodies. But that distinction should be really much less than what it is. Yeah. It becomes just the nurturer and the doer. There was that lovely comedy play, Defending the Caveman. I don't know if you ever saw that. When he speaks about, you know, the hunters and the gatherers, and then the... And beautifully as well, that distinction is becoming less and less. Now we have gender fluidity. Now you can allow...
Pansexual.
Exactly. And not just be that, almost be allowed to be that. I mean, we have a lot of... I know we've got a long road ahead with that as well. But I'm just sad that that is even a road that had to be paved, that it wasn't just always a road.
You see, one of the things that's worked for me over the years of studying philosophy and reading philosophy is there was a guy called George Friedrich Hegel, and he came up with what is called the Hegelian dialectic, and it's a very simple process which can be used to analyze virtually anything and in its movement through history. And so Hegel had this thing that whatever exists, whatever the thing is right now, is what he called the thesis. And simply by this thing being the way it is and being here now as it is, it will generate an oppositional energy to itself called the antithesis.
Right.
And so you have the thesis, the antithesis, and in the interaction between those two, you get what he calls the synthesis. And out of the synthesis comes, well, the synthesis, that joining will eventually then become the thesis, which will generate an antithesis, and on we go, and the dialectic. So the pendulum keeps swinging all the time. So I think the observant person looks at what's happening now and says, oh, this is terrible, and you know, the survivalists, the doomsday preppers are out there, and the zombie apocalypse is coming, and we're running. You know, things have been pretty bad most of history.
Absolutely.
It's just depending on how it's worked for you.
That is such a good point, because I often read, oh, what is this world coming to? Maybe this world has always been like this. Really it has. So you're very right there. And I think again it becomes, because we're brought up like this, you know, don't cause any trouble, don't let anybody see this, don't tell the family, what will they say?
But that's how the shadow originates, you see. So the child arrives, trading clouds of glory.
Right.
Endless
potential.
As William Blake says, you know, we arrive with endless potential. And the first word that a toddler learns to say is?
No.
No. Because it's the word it hears most often. Exactly. No.
Right.
And society wants us to run on rails. And because it wants us to run on rails, for good cause, because we need order, and because we're afraid of chaos, so we run on the rails. But while we're doing that, we're being told there's all these things about me, my unique self, that's not appropriate. So I've got to break that off, and I've got to throw it into my shadow bag.
Right.
And with it goes my gold, because it's my uniqueness that I'm also throwing away. And I become this conforming drone. And one needs to do that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, in the shadow bag is all the gold. Now, if I keep running towards the light and want to be brilliant and shiny and glitzy and sparkly, as Rain Man used to say, we can't all just be sparkly. There has to come a time when I stop and my shadow bag arrives and hits me on the back of the head and said, okay, there's some stuff you need to look at here.
Yeah.
And it's in that process that the integration begins. And I go digging in the mess of this compost of all my failures and my disasters. Right. And discover that failure is what's taught me the most wisdom.
Absolutely.
That's where my gold has been hidden.
Yes, exactly. And also by doing that earlier, which is what I'm trying to figure out, you know, at what point, I mean, I have a son, he's 8. I am as honest, age appropriately as I can be. You know, I don't ever pretend that I'm perfect and I'm never going to make a mistake. It's just, I couldn't do that. But it's so true what you're saying about that unique thing, which is exactly where astrology comes in. You know, in India for many, many years, so they would practice Vedic astrology in India. But I'm not sure how prominent it still is, but when you had a baby, your parents would go and they would have your chart drawn
it's still
up.
Very big.
And it's so important. I find when I can do that for clients, I mean, I did that with my son, and it's put me on a complete different footing. It really has. And then in India, what they do, which is quite beautiful, is they will then give that chart to their child as a 21st birthday, or as like a special ceremony birthday. Exactly. So yes, there are certain house rules that we all have to abide by, as you say, you know, no, this is not appropriate. But still, within that, now I'm able to say, oh, you know what, my son is not a sportsman. Therefore, I'm not going to force him to be the rugby player that I always wanted to be, because I already know that's actually so destructive. Yeah. So definitely, as a Western society and civilization, we aren't doing that. We're expecting all our kids to fit in the same set of. And we're forgetting, actually, the beauty that they just inherently have in them, which is their strength.
I'd like to go back to the question that you asked me earlier on, when you said to me, is it possible in this life? Mm-hmm. So I find the Buddhist realms of existence that is very emphasized as a wheel. I think there are 8 different realms that you can be born into or rebirthed into. And just above us is the realm of the gods.
Right.
I think it's called the Asura realm. In the Asura realm, the gods are like the Greek Olympian gods. You know, there's no real hassle there. There's no pain there because they're gods, for God's sake.
Right.
So life is cool.
They're living the good life.
They live, and it's the realm which you all think, oh boy, if I could get the right house, the right car, the right wife,
absolutely,
the right partner, I would live that life. But the Buddhists say that's not a good realm to be born into, because without suffering, you're not going to work on anything.
Right.
Below the human realm is the realm of what's called the hungry ghosts. Now, it's always portrayed with people with thin little necks and big mouths and big tummies, and it's the realm of craving. It's where addicts live. So the realm of addiction and craving that can never be fulfilled is a hell realm. So just to be in hell is also dreadful.
Absolutely.
So the human realm, according to the Buddhist teaching, is the best place to be rebirthed into, because there's joy, some of the heavenly realm, but there's also the suffering.
Right.
And it's in that tension and combination of the light and the shadow,
That
the
we have
yin
that
and the
emotion,
yang,
right.
the tension, that we can best work on ourselves and to come to integration. So for me, you know, as painful as this human existence is, I think it's the best we can do.
Absolutely. So where do you think we go from here? How, you know, I've gone back also into, you know, that sort of 50s and 60s decades where women would say, well, actually now we would like to vote, and actually now we would like to go out and work as well. And and that's beautiful, and that was exactly what was needed back then. And if we look astrologically, you can bet your bottom dollar we're going to find that transit that went, oh, wait, there's more. But from there, I am aware that, so we can look back in history and find so many answers, you know. Why did we decide to put ourselves in a man's office? We forgot about our own nurturing nature, and we didn't monetize that, or
put on
now we
the
do,
power
but
suit.
yes. So there's this, not competition, but there's this, okay, well, I want to be equal to you, but I think even as Westerners, that's very misunderstood. You know, I think you and I can be equal in the fact that we are so different. That's where that beauty lies, that we can have this conversation. I have no fear that you're going to lean over and slap me because I'm saying something that doesn't, you know, please you, or that might be a bit too forward. And that's what I'm trying to, how do we move forward? You know, all of us wearing black and marching.
Well, I think that's necessary. I think
it's the start,
we need.
But now what becomes the integrating that we can say, okay, we can start setting these workshops into place, or we can start maybe educating moms on when to start with that soul side.
Well, you see, you know, as you can see, I'm very old, and so I've lived through. I've lived through. I lived through apartheid. I'm a child of apartheid, so I was born in the height of apartheid, and then when I got involved in struggle politics and discovered that the biggest job before we could have any transition out of apartheid is that the people who were the most oppressed needed to become aware, and we called it conscientized, that they were oppressed.
Right.
Because that's the worst thing about oppression. It's so insidious that eventually you drink the Kool-Aid and you believe the lie.
Yeah.
And so you ask me what to do, I would say that the most important thing is that once you've woken up to whatever it is that you've woken up to in your journey, please don't fall asleep. Exactly. Because our Western myths are full of women falling asleep. There's Sleeping Beauty, there's...
Absolutely.
You know,
and there's always a prince that has to come and save you.
Yeah, but the prince is inside yourself. It's not
yes,
a male.
It's not portrayed as that.
No.
It's made to be absolutely...
Yeah, and so everybody's wanting to be Barbie waiting for, you know, or a little princess waiting for the knight in shining armor. And I think that perpetuates the oppressive role where you've actually been put to sleep.
And you haven't yet realized that you're asleep.
And the other thing that for me is very important is that we have to try to deal with these things mythically. Create, play with them. This whole, you know, the Buddhists say to us, and the Hindus, in fact, Eastern philosophy says to you, this is all a dream.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. This
it's
is all an illusion.
It's all a dream, Alice. You know.
Yes.
So I'm not sure that completely nails it down. But I think in the West, we could benefit from some of that dreaminess.
Absolutely.
So I've got a very dear teacher and friend, Nadine Ceronio, who spent many years as a Buddhist Theravada nun, and then met her husband, and he was a monk, and they disrobed and got married, and they got very profound teachers. Now Nadine Ceronio, coming at it from the East, and me coming at it from the West, so the West is very good on activism.
Right.
The West is very strong on just get in there, do something,
Right.
make it happen.
Yes.
And for God's sake, don't sit on a cushion and meditate and gaze at your
Yes.
navel, because the view's not going to improve, right? so we're suspicious of this contemplative side.
Right.
And so we go at things Buddha gate,
Yes.
so that now Nadine Ceronio comes at it from the other side, and Nadine Ceronio wrote a book recently, and she's very involved in the ecological crisis, and she's a total activist. And she wrote a book to Buddhists saying, time to stand up.
Right.
Get your butt off the cushion.
Yes.
So again, here we have the yin-yang tension,
Right.
So I think for those of us who are activists and who are out there and need to be marching, and please don't then forget to go and sit down, because you can't always breathe out.
Right.
Sometimes you
Yes.
have to
you have
breathe
to,
in.
you have to fill up again.
But
Absolutely.
if you're a more contemplative person, don't be afraid to put your hand up and get out there.
Yes.
And
And bring that beautiful wisdom out, exactly.
so again, we're back into the tension.
And then also the cultural thing where, somebody whose belief systems are completely different to mine has no interest in listening to me at first. So I feel it's important as well, that sort of crossing over but gently, so that we don't walk in there like this is how you have to be, because that's what I think is right. So it becomes, I think it really, first and foremost, boils down to respect, which is exactly why the violence is so prevalent, because there is none. So there's that void there. And I can see already in my own home with the conversations, and at what point I go, not necessarily, there's no fight, but now you're suddenly looking at it differently, going, well, actually you can't say that to me because that's disrespectful. Whereas I never noticed before or thought that. Now I'm going, well, hang on, actually.
And there's the raising of the consciousness, the conscientization.
Exactly.
The other thing that we have to admit in this human realm is that sometimes people change because they see the light. But the truth is, most of us change because we feel the heat.
Yeah, right, you get uncomfortable.
So, we all want to be enlightened, but sometimes it's the very crisis of our life, the very breakdown, the very shattering of everything that actually leads us. And so we shy away from failure, and we don't want to look at our shadow and our dark side. But I love Leonard Cohen's song, one of his last songs, where he talks about, the song's called Anthem. And he says, ring the bell that still can ring, but forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in.
Yeah.
So if your life is cracked and shattered and broken, yes, celebrate that.
Absolutely.
You have not, this is, what you see as a failure, today's failure, is actually tomorrow's wisdom.
Yeah, and I'm hoping as well, hoping above all hopes, that, because for me, along with respect comes that you have the freedom to live your path exactly as you need to.
Yeah.
And I've seen that in you with where you come from, with your religious background, and then you have a lot of Buddhist knowledge as well. So here you are speaking to an astrologer, and I love that, and that's very much what my mission is with this channel, is to show how integrative it all is, because that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Many paths, one.
Well, I've just recently, as you know, and thank you for allowing me to plug it, started a channel called the Wounded Angel Network, and it's a picture of two boys carrying an angel that's fallen. They're carrying the angel on the stretcher. But if you check out Peter Woods at the Wounded Angel Network, I'm trying to grapple with that thing of helping wounded angels learn to fly again. And I think that's also what all we're wanting to do, is help one person breathe easier today.
Right, and then with the vision that many more will not have to get to that point.
Exactly.
I understand, though, it is as you say. You have to be sad in order to understand the joy of laughing. I get that, but it's highly off balance. Even with my child, there's certain things that I have to work slightly differently because of certain placements he has that I know make him extremely sensitive. And it is actually such a fight with certain family members or institutions because they're not just stopping and going, you know what, that's actually a very respectful thing. They see it as, you're letting this child do whatever he wants. And sure, I could obviously listen to that, but I see immediately how we have so hardened to this is how this works, and then this is how this works, that we've forgotten to see that it actually doesn't work like that. How many people in their 40s suddenly come thronging to you because now they're having their breakdowns and I don't know who I am, and I should have everything sorted by now, but I don't.
Well, you see,
That's
we
more than
believed
fine.
the lies that we were told.
Exactly, and so did our parents. So we can't even blame our parents because they're just.
I mean, in apartheid, growing up in apartheid, as I said, I was told that because I was a white male, I would always be the boss.
Oh,
I'd
yes,
always be in charge.
Ahead, yeah.
Anybody who didn't look like me or
Yeah.
speak like me or think like me would have to bow the knee to me.
Yes.
Well, that
They
was
have to be paid by you.
that was bullshit.
Absolutely, and
total
still
lie.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, part of my but I'm very grateful that I had to hit that wall
Yeah.
and wake up, you know. So our disillusionment is an interesting word. We talk about, I'm so disillusioned.
Right.
Well, what if you look at the word, can you see illusion in this? So maybe disillusionment is when you have your illusions dissed.
Right.
And that needs to happen.
And that's actually a good thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, what kind of time frame is a healthy time frame for anger, do you think? Can we do that? No. You know, at what point do we say, because
When
it's
you've
true
had
what
enough,
you
you've had enough.
right, okay, and then I'm going to lash out and say enough. But then what? You know, people, I'm sure you find this with, for example, marriage counselling. They realize that, okay, we're uncomfortable, there's a problem, we'll go and see somebody. So there's that hour a week, and then you finish the process. How long potentially before they're right back into that rut?
Well, it all depends. You see, if we're doing real conflict resolution, if we really
Which is what we really need now. We need the real stuff. Yes.
if we're going to actually be prepared to go into the labyrinth underneath the castle, you know, when King Minos builds the labyrinth to hide the Minotaur, that terrible beast that's been born out of his wife making love to this prize bull. He wants to hide that. It's a thing of shame.
Yes.
So, but he builds the labyrinth where the Minotaur lives, underneath his own castle. So underneath all of our castles is this raging monster.
Right.
And it's the love of Ariadne that allows the hero to go in and to find the Minotaur. And it is a heroic journey. If we're just going to go for couples therapy or whatever therapy, just to once again to regain our respectability, don't waste your money.
That's the thing.
Don't waste your money. It's Band-Aid.
That's
It's
the thing.
bullshit.
It's exactly with these protests now. It's beautiful, necessary, but then what next? There must be a next. Like you say, don't fall asleep again. There must be a next integration.
And maybe, you know, and I really have deep respect for activists, and I've spent some of my life, in my younger life, as an activist and got very burnt out by it. It's exhausting.
Absolutely.
So it's heroic what people do. And maybe just by the action, the Occupy movement, the peaceful protests that we had in Cape Town, I think if just one person goes, hey, I need to think about this,
Right.
then I think it's worth it. You know? So again, everybody belongs, everybody's included. At this stage of my life, I'm no longer an activist, but I have huge respect for activists and we need them. So it's about the standing up and the sitting down thing.
Yes, exactly. Yes, and just in closing, I want to come back to your monster, which you spoke of, which we all have, our shadow. The thing that I think is really the most important to remember is that once we integrate that and we look at it, that monster is actually just a big cuddly baby. Once I can say, you know what, I'm a bitch sometimes, then you know what, chances are I'm less of a bitch already because I become self-aware. When I'm about to say that thing because I now feel angry, I go, it's probably not necessary. And there my shadow has just immediately it's in me, I'm aware of it, but it's now not raging anymore, and it's not this monster that wants to come out.
It's interesting for me in the Hindu pantheon of gods, and they have a god for everything. It's a magnificent system. that they have the goddess Kali.
Right.
And she has skulls around her, and she's dark, and she's wild. And people go into Kali trances where they allow the shadow to breathe. So
Yes.
I let your,
Yeah.
pat your dragon, allow it to breathe,
Yes.
and it'll go back to sleep
Right,
again.
exactly.
But deny your dragon, it'll
Oh,
come
yeah.
storming through your house and burn
Absolutely.
everything down.
Absolutely. And important also then which is very difficult for us because we've been so hurt right from that first day in school, maybe even before. If I find lately the more honest I just am about what it is that I'm feeling or experiencing, then the other person doesn't necessarily take it personally as well, because that's our big lesson too. Oh, you know what, Peter said this thing to me. Meanwhile, Peter didn't actually mean it like that at all. There was no ill intention behind it, but here I am now going, oh. And once I can understand that about you, you know what, he does say those things sometimes, it's not meant like that. Now they're no longer. So it becomes true respect for each other.
And insight, insight is the holy grail for me.
Exactly. And now we can start growing as humans, and we can start really tackling problems and creating projects and moving forward. And everybody is actually listening because we're not trying to fight each other anymore,
Yep.
or outdo each other anymore. So make peace with your monster. Even in astrology, we would say that Saturn would be, which has just gone direct, as I mentioned. So now we feel, I can move again, I can get things off the ground again. But when I sit with people with their Saturn, I often see fear, because I'll say it's our restrictor, it's the lessons. Because we immediately think, I've been bad. But a lesson doesn't mean that. It's simply just something you're learning. It's a way you're growing. And that's actually a beautiful thing. Even though at times it's obviously difficult. Why can't I express this thing? Oh, right, it's because of that. Now it makes it easier, and I can almost, because I've detached from that emotion of I'm not good enough, now I'm suddenly good enough.
But you see, I think that's where this whole consumer, I want to be happy all the time thing just doesn't help us.
No.
Because pain, we've come to associate with punishment.
Right.
But pain, as a woman, and as a mother, pain is often birth.
Right.
So how is that punishment? Pain can often be a wonderful gift. When we inflict pain on others, I think that's a whole different thing.
Yes.
But the natural life process of experiencing pain often is a wonderful birth.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Just really good to sit with you.
Thank you, and thank you to all those who are watching.
Yeah, and please tell us where we can find you. I will also drop a link in the channel, but please do tell us.
Yeah, the Wounded Angel Network. I'm on YouTube. If you just look for Wounded Angel and Peter Woods, you'll find me. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Nadine.